we're going to go through what it is that anthropologists study. And anthropology actually breaks down into several fields. And the first of these fields is physical anthropology. Physical anthropology. What do physical anthropologists do? Physical anthropologists study physical things. Oh, well, physiology. They study bones, structure. Now, I just watched a TV program on the TV. Ooh, that goes together, doesn't it? Anyway, I was watching a TV program over the weekend, Life After the Dinosaurs. Now, you know, we're putting together ancient history. Nobody knows really what happened, but we're making some scientific, intelligent guesses. And one of the guesses that scientists are making is that a huge asteroid struck the Earth and created chaotic atmospheric stress that caused the demise of the dinosaurs. Now, whether that happened or not, we'll let the scientists work that out. But we do know that the dinosaurs did die off. And as they died off, there was an increasing number of other animals that came into prominence. These were the mammals and the marsupials. Now, there are literally hundreds, even thousands of animals that began to demonstrate or take up their place in the ecological structure in Australia, in Africa, in Asia, and in North America, many of whom look only roughly like present-day animals. Now, one of the things that physical anthropologists or physiology scholars do is they find these bones and they try to reconstruct what those animals look like. And they can come up with some fairly accurate descriptions of what an animal is like. For instance, I used to pay a nickel for any Donnie who would bring me an odd bone and tell me about it. So they would come in with these odd little bones. I found this in the river, or I found this in a bank. And I'd say, okay, what is it like? What is it? We don't know. What's it similar to? And they would tell me, well, it's similar to a pig's jaw, but it's not because of, and they would describe it. Well, I found this absolutely fascinating. One day, a couple of young lads came and said, Hayward, we went down into this cave. It was a limestone cave, and we found some bird bones down there and some animal bones down there. And we decided that we would tell you about it so you could come and go into the cave with us, and then you could pay us for the fine. Well, I said, okay, let's do it. So my sons and myself, we went on this trip way up into the high mountains, and we got to the limestone cave, and we had to ship it out a little bit because big fat me couldn't quite get in where these little boys had gotten in, but we got in there, and we found some bones. So we dug them up and brought them out, and the Donnie looked at them and said, oh my goodness, we have never seen an animal with those kinds of bones. Now, these were just brand new believers in Jesus Christ. And when they saw those bones, they said, are these the bones of a ghost animal? Because they were still very much hooked into the spiritual world. Is this a spirit bone? No. They said, well, it's no animal we've ever seen. And I was in a dilemma because they were having a crisis of faith. They were convinced that we had found the bones of some kind of malevolent spirit. I said, don't worry about it. I'll take it back to the United States when I go home, and I will have the physical anthropologists at the University of California, Santa Barbara, analyze them, and we'll tell you what they are. They said, okay, so they let it rest. Well, I brought those bones, I wrapped them up in clothes in my suitcase and brought them, and I showed up in Santa Barbara on my next furlough. I went to see Phil Walker, who has since passed on, but Phil Walker was the leading physical anthropologist at UC Santa Barbara. And I said, hey, Phil, what kind of bones are these? And he looked at them. And he looked at the teeth and he said, this, by the shape of the teeth and the jaw, is a vegetable-eating creature. It is not a meat-eating creature. It is something that eats leaves or grasses or berries. He said the hind legs. I could tell from the structure of the hind legs that this is some kind of a marsupial that hopped. Well, we had a creature out there in Papua, West Papua, that was what we called a tree kangaroo. Now, it's not like the kangaroos in Australia that hop around and look really weird. These are cute little creatures. If they were here, be standing about maybe 2 feet tall, big, long, furry tail, cute little face, really lovely little creatures until you got hold of them, in which case they then begin to chew your finger off and claw you with their claws. We tried to keep one as a pet for a while. We always had to pick him up with welding gloves because he tried to attack us every time. But in any case, it's some kind of a tree kangaroo. But it was not any kind of modern day tree kangaroo. Okay, what are we going to do with it? He said, let me send it to my friend in Australia who's an expert on animals in the southern hemisphere. We'll see what. So he sent it off to him, made plaster molds of it before he sent it off, sent it on down to this friend in Australia, and he analyzed it and he said it's an extinct form of marsupial. We have found a marsupial that has long since died out. He said, Hayward's going to be famous over this. We'll name it after Hayward. Ooh, I said, oh, wait a minute, we got a problem. You see, because, I didn't think it was anything. I'm just trying to tell the Donnie that it's not a ghost spirit. So I said, I only wrapped it up in my dirty underwear and brought it home. And I didn't get permission to take it out of the country. And if it turns out to be valuable, the Indonesian government's going to accuse me of stealing national treasure. I said, you can't announce that it's me that found it. He said, bummer. Okay, we won't name it after you after all. So then they started this big feeding frenzy. Another anthropologist said, well, I'll go back and I'll get permission to go to that cave and I'll look for more and we'll get permission to take the bones out and then Hayward can become famous. He said, but you got to give me the rights to go look. And I said, hey, wait a minute. I already gave the rights to this guy, now you want it. You guys are kind of in professional competition with one another. I don't want any part of this. I don't know anything. What bones are you talking about? I've never heard of any bones, kind of thing. But you can tell. You can tell. There are things that physical anthropologists can tell about you. Now, you young ladies who have long hair, 12, 18, 24 inches, are you aware that your hair is recording everything that you eat? So if we were to take several strands of your hair and we were to run it through an appropriate machine, we could find out what kind of nutrition you were able to access ever since that hair started growing, right up to the present. Back a year and a half ago, you were eating pretty good, but you know what? You're eating an awful lot of starch now. You're on the Biola diet. Now, I can't tell you whether it's peas and carrots or whether it's pizza, but we can give you an analysis of your nutrition through your hair. As a matter of fact, we even did about 300 hair samples from the Donnie to try to figure out whether Donnie women and Donnie men had significantly different abilities to access meat. Did the men go up and go hunting and then, kill a pig or kill a wild animal and then eat it up there, then come back and say, oh no, we didn't catch anything, when in point of fact they're already filled up with lots of meat and they're telling their wives and kids they didn't get anything. Was there different access to protein by the hunters versus the women? Well, the answer we discovered is no. The Donnie men really did share their meat with women. There was no significant difference in their nutritional intake. You could do that through looking at hair samples. They also came to Phil Walker one day. They said, Phil, we'd like you to do an analysis of a human body that we found. And as the story goes, there was a family that was having a picnic up in one of the parks, right next to the foothills behind Santa Barbara. And one of the little kids from the picnic, he went scrambling up into the underbrush, and he came back screaming, Mommy, 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 I just found a dead body. And sure enough, they called the sheriff's department. Sheriff's department went up there, and here are the skeletal remains of somebody lying in the scrub brush. There are no signs of clothing, no signs of anything to identify him except the body. They've done everything they can. They've examined them, still have not been able to identify who this person is or how they died. So they asked Phil Walker, would you examine this skeleton and help us solve this death? He said, okay. So he examined it. And he noticed several things. He noticed that one of the ribs was chipped. And he said, I strongly suspect that this person was shot. The bullet went into the chest, chipped the bone, and came out the other side. He said, I would suggest that you go back up to where the body was found. You dig right around where the ribs would have been, and see if you could find the bullet in the dirt, because it looks like it might have passed all the way through the body. And if the body was killed, if the person was killed on that location, the bullet will be there. So they go back up, and the sheriff's department dug around, found the bullet in the dirt. They said, aha, we now have a murder. Okay, who is our guy? Now you could do dental analysis. You've all seen CSI. They did all the dental, but there were no dental records that matched this person's dental record. So they said, okay, what else can you tell us about him? So Phil kept looking around. He finally said, listen, this man, I can tell by the way the bones are structured. Your bones will record your muscle mass. The manner in which your muscles attach to your bones will affect what the bones look like. So, he said, this person has a well-developed upper body and a just kind of a normal lower body. This is somebody who does a lot of weightlifting, but who is not an exercise buff. This is not somebody who goes down to 24-hour fitness gym and does a full body workout. This is somebody who is simply building upper body. And Phil Walker said, this is characteristic of somebody who has a prison history. Because a lot of prisoners like to go out into the exercise yard, pull off their t-shirts, do the weightlifting, and strut their stuff among the other prisoners. He said, I suspect this person is a former prison convict. But it still is no help. Finally, they said to him, Phil, one more attempt to try to identify who this man is. Would you do a plaster cast of his face? So, Phil agreed to it. Now, once again, Some of you have big fat cheeks. Some of you have narrow jaws. Some of you, all of that is recorded in your bone structure. So he started building a model cast of what this man would look based purely on the bone structures. What his jaw would look like, how much fat to put on here, how fat even to make the lips, how broad to make the nose. He created it all and presented the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department with a composite model of what this person looked like. They said, okay, let's see if we can find out who it is. So they put a picture of that plaster model in the Santa Barbara news press and said, has anybody seen this person? He is a person of interest for an ongoing investigation. I got a telephone call. Telephone call was from a Hispanic woman. She said, I saw my son's picture in the newspaper. What do you want from him? Or what do you want him for? And they said, oh, we just want to ask him some questions. Have you seen your son lately? She says, no, I haven't seen him for several months. And why not? Well, she said, because he got out of prison a while back, and he's on parole, and I thought maybe he had violated his parole and didn't want to contact me to get me into any further trouble. But has something happened to my son? And they said, give us his name. We think we may have found your son. They found the name, they were able to match it to his prison records. Case solved. Physical anthropologists are trained to do this kind of stuff. And whenever there is a major crisis or catastrophe, they're the ones who are called in to identify body parts, to indicate who they belong to. They can tell your age. I don't know if you're aware of it, but if you're willing to sacrifice a leg, we can take your leg, cut open the leg bone, and we can tell you your nutrition for the entirety of your life. Because it's all recorded, just like tree rings, in your anatomy. These are the kinds of things they do. And they are phenomenal. When 9/11 happened 10 years ago, every physical anthropologist who had any skills at all was called to come to New York to help identify body parts and to match them together with the appropriate corpses that were there. It's not exactly the most exciting profession in the world, but it is extremely challenging. Well, then there are archaeologists. Now, when it comes to archaeology, quite frankly, this is where most people think anthropology belongs. Whenever I go on an airplane trip and I'm sitting in the seat, if it's going to happen. Almost every time it's going to happen. The person next to you is going to say, and what do you do? Now, if I don't want to talk to them, because sometimes I got a lot of things to do and I don't want to talk. I used to tell them, I'm an auditor for the IRS. When did you file last? That was really, oh yeah, well, nice meeting you. That was the end of the conversation. But I discovered that's not really honest. So I really ought to be more honest. So when they ask me now, I say, I'm a Baptist evangelist. Do you know Jesus Christ? And you want to talk about stopping a conversation? Oh, that's it. But if I want to talk, if I'm gregarious and I'm well slept up and I don't have a book to read and I'm not pressed for time, and they ask me, what do you do? If I want to spark a conversation, I can say, I'm a teacher. I can predict to you exactly what their next question is. And what do you teach? And so my next answer will be, I teach anthropology. And inevitably, their next response is going to be, and have you dug up anything interesting lately? No, I'm not that kind of an anthropologist. Anthropologists aren't necessarily guys who dig things up. Archaeologists look at extinct cultures, cultures that have ceased to exist anymore. And the only way we can know about them is by finding their remains in the ground somewhere. Now, we happen to be digging for the new Hope dormitory down here, and sure enough, we dug up some bones. And oh boy, whenever you dig up bones, you got to stop the whole construction project, and you got to pull all the bones out, and then you got to analyze them. So they dug up these bones down there, and they had to stop the whole construction project. Now, fortunately, it was over to the side, and Paul Agawalter, who's our physical anthropologist and archaeologist, he went down and said, what we have here are the bones of a large mastodon, a prehistoric elephant. It's right here. Now, back in the days before your mommy and daddy were even running around, or before your grandparents were running around, or even their grandparents, La Mirada was a huge lake. All of this was underwater. It wasn't a very deep lake, but it was a lake. The water finally all drained off and it became dry land, and next thing you know, we got a university on this ground. But it used to be a lake. And at one point, it would appear that this mastodon wandered into the lake, maybe fled into the lake to get away from some of those, big old fanged prehistoric cougars or whatever they're called. But whatever it was, it got in there, got stuck, died, and got washed down to Hope. and stayed there until we dug it up. Now, a lot of our archaeology students, as part of their coursework, go down there and dig on it, and they've got the tusk, a huge big tusk, about ready to come out of the ground now. They've got it into a nice sleeve to keep it from falling apart. And one of these days, we're going to have the president go down and help to lift it out of the ground. But they've got the tooth. I don't know how much you know about mastodon or elephant anatomy, but they all have a big tooth, and it's sort of like a big boulder right here and another one on top. So that, they can crush things between them, and then of course they've got the tusk and all. But we've pulled out the tooth, at least one of the teeth, and we've got the tusk ready to go, and we don't know how much more is in there. We got to keep digging. There's no great hurry on it. The provost has said we can have the site for as long as we want. So we every semester dig out a few more cubic square feet and see what we can come up with. Along with the mastodon, we've come up with the bones of dozens of foxes and bats and birds, other things that drowned in the lake and washed down to Hope. So, but we're discovering things about life in Southern California that existed before the present. And that's what archaeologists do. We are going to be trying to form a promised land excavation group, perhaps even as early as next summer, when we'll be taking Biola students to the Holy Land, to Israel, to engage in an archaeological dig there, as further exposure for Biola students in the archaeology program to be able to get some experience in digging in the Holy Land. So it can be very exciting. It can be as boring as all get out. But when it's exciting, it can be very exciting because it gives us insights as to what our ancestors used to do. Then there are linguistic anthropologists. Now, linguistic anthropologists are those who study language. the spread of language drift. Now, we've got a half a dozen linguistic type folks running around here. A number of them are with the Summer Institute of Linguistics, but some of them are very, very qualified. And I was at a dinner conversation the other day, and this linguistic scholar was telling me about the Sulawesi Islands. Now, for those of you who are geographically challenged, the Sulawesi Islands are those islands in Indonesia, and it sort of looks like a hand. There's a big part of it, and then there are all these little strings up there. It's one of the Indonesian archipelago islands, and when you get to the top of the Sulawesi Islands, then you go a little bit further, you're into the Philippines. So there's Sulawesi, and the question has been raised, where did Sulawesi ever get the name Sulawesi? Because the local people didn't use that term. Who named the Sulawesi Island Sulawesi? Well, leave it to a linguist or linguistic anthropologist to figure that out. He's been studying local languages, and the first European explorers that were sailing through those islands discovered, as they were leaving one island to go to the Sulawesi Islands, that there was a strong current that ran between the two island chains. And when he asked the local people, what is that? They said, oh, that is Sulawesi. Oh, so the early explorers wrote down Sulawesi, the plural of Sulawesi. So the name for this whole island in Indonesia was given to them by another group of people talking about a strong current that goes between the island chains that were written down and recorded in history. Now, languages do change. You see, way back, when Magellan decided to sail around the world, and he had a logistic problem. What is his crew going to eat? So they're in South America, and they stop and they pick up just basketfuls of food, including sweet potatoes and other new world foods, including tobacco. And then they sailed across the ocean until they hit Indonesia. And when they got to Indonesia, they got all these old rotten sweet potatoes, and they've got some leftover tobacco, and they want to trade it for some fresh food. So they give all of their old rotten food to the Indonesians, and along with, beads and things, and they buy fresh food. They introduced tobacco into Asia. They also introduced sweet potatoes. Probably also introduced corn into Africa. Now these are going to change the whole diet of the entire world. Corn, sweet potatoes, tobacco is going to change the eating habits of the entire globe. Even white potatoes is going to change the diet of Northern Europeans and of the Irish in particular. They'd never been known before 1492. Well, tobacco made its way over long trade routes, all the way into the highlands of New Guinea. And we show up there in the 1960s, and we find tobacco. And we said, hey, what's that stuff? And they said, oh, that's tabo. Tabo is a local variation of the word tobacco, which is a South American term. So linguistic anthropologists can begin to chart how new ideas, people groups, ideas, and language shifts. And it can be very, very exciting. So they look at languages. Then there are applied anthropologists. Now, applied anthropologists are going to be the kind of people who try to do something practical with what they learn. They're going to look at how to improve people's lives. They're going to look at how to solve human problems. Now, when it comes to applied anthropology, some of you may have the privilege of getting to know Dr. Katrina Green. Dr. Katrina Green teaches at our School of Intercultural Studies. She does all of our community development classes. And she will look at the manner in which change and improvement can be evaluated, introduced, how problems of scarcity can be analyzed, and try to introduce new kinds of change. Now, as missionaries, we sought to introduce some cultural changes. We wanted to introduce cultural changes that would not adversely affect the culture. We were not out there to destroy culture. We were out there to see if we couldn't transform the level of existence into a better form. One of the things we discovered was the Danis were very low in protein. They were basically a vegetarian people. When we did that little hair analysis, we discovered that this was the largest population of people in the entire globe that's been studied to date. I have to put those little caveats in there. The lowest protein consuming culture in the entire world. They basically lived on a vegetarian diet. Now, vegans and vegetarians will love that, but you know what? The death rate for kids was 45%. So the children between the ages of their birth to the ages of 45% of them are going to die, primarily from malnutrition and untreated diseases. We wanted to change that if at all possible, and indeed, we brought the survival rate back up to over 70% before we finally got done. But one of the things we wanted to do was try to introduce a way to get more meat into their diet. And somebody came up with a bright idea. It wasn't me, because I'm not that smart. Let's teach them how to raise sheep. Because sheep eat grass. You don't have to plant grass. You just let the sheep go and eat up all the grass around. And every year they'll have a couple of lambs, and they'll grow and grow and grow. And sheep will be a great adjustment. So we talked to the Donnie about it and said, oh, we'd love that idea. Let's raise sheep. Well, the job fell to me. Now, I'm a city boy. You know, I mean, you want to put me onto the subway, run me through town, you want to put me on a Greyhound bus, you know, and travel to San Francisco, I'll even walk down through Skid Row with you. I'm pretty city savvy, but I don't know squat about sheep. But I quickly found out they are the dumbest animals you get. They're just waiting to get sick and die. I have a new appreciation for shepherds after trying to start a sheep project in West Papua. And one of the guys that we gave the sheep to, the mother died, so he brought this little baby lamb to me. Oh, it's going to die, its mother died. Will you take care of it? I said, okay, I'll take care of it. So he gives me this little baby lamb. I come in and my wife looks at me and says, you're sleeping alone. Okay, so I put a little box down by my bed, and I got a little, milk bottle and cut the nipple a little bit, and we, fed that little lamb, and he began to flourish. And he bonded with me. I became his mommy. And I'd get up in the morning about 6:30, and I'd, crawl out of bed and make my way down the hall, all sleepily, ready to start a fire in the wood stove so I can make a pot of coffee and get started on the day. And as I'm walking down the hall, tip tap, tip tap, tip tap, my little baby lamb was following me to the kitchen. You can't leave those darn suckers. They're going to stay with you forever. You got to carry them with you whenever you go. You got to protect. Oh, I declare, hate sheep. But we introduced sheep. Now, we made one big mistake. I learned how to raise sheep. We brought up people up from Australia who told us how to raise sheep. Better yet, we brought some up from New Zealand. They got more sheep in New Zealand than got people, you know. And so we had a sheep raising project. But we made one fatal mistake. We trained the men in the villages how to take care of the sheep. And this was a brand new occupation. Men don't care for the animals in Donny culture. Women care for the animals. Women take care of the pigs. They raise the baby pigs. They watch over them. They feed them. They give them the food. We trained the men to do all of that. And when the men got busy, they didn't feed their sheep. And half of them starved to death in the first 2 years. Here I'm supposed to be the smart guy, see? And we trained the wrong group of people. We needed to train the women how to take care of the sheep. Now, applied anthropologists, that's their job. They look at problems, they try to come up with solutions, they try to introduce them in a way that will ensure their success, that will ensure the well-being of the culture, and improve it for the better. Now, every change has both good and bad effects. I told you earlier how we discovered that bad nutrition caused almost half of the kids to die before the age of 5. So we started introducing nutritional techniques. We started working on training a group of women to be prenatal and postnatal caregivers. We trained a whole bunch of women to be midwives. And the birth rate dropped, or the birth rate shot up, the death rate dropped dramatically. We were excited, but that created a problem. Because now, instead of a stable population that was growing very, very slowly, all of a sudden we have a mushrooming population and we need more garden space. We need to turn more jungle into gardens. We need to have more land to expand into because we have larger villages. We are creating a human demographic problem by a large increase in population. Did we do a bad thing? On the one hand, we did a good thing. On the other, we created a new problem. This is part of the challenge of being an applied anthropologist. We work on that here. If we're going to be agents of transformation, we need to be responsible agents of transformation. So we have whole classes on that here in the School of Intercultural Studies. Then comes cultural anthropology. That's what I are. I are a cultural anthropologist. Cultural anthropologists, yeah, you can still see it on the screen there, all beams that fade off. They deal with living cultures. They examine people's lifestyles today. Now, for this class, you will be reading When Bamboo Blew. This is a story of a cultural anthropologist who happens to also be an applied anthropologist because she's doing medical work, but she's going to describe what it's like in Taliban-controlled Afghani culture. That's what we do. We describe living cultures today. Right now I'm reading a dissertation written by a graduate student from another university, and it's about a tribal group in Tanzania, and he's looking at how do they treat or address the issues of death, sickness, and tragedy in this particular culture. It's a fascinating study. And he's looking at what should be the missionary response to death and tragedy. Well, this is a class on cultural anthropology. We're not going to be looking at physical anthropology. I wouldn't know a tailbone from a chin bone. I leave that up to Paul Engelwalter. When it comes to archaeology, I do not know how to use a shovel and a trowel. Shovels just do not fit these hands. I discovered that a long time ago. But we have classes on this. Paul Engelwalter teaches these classes. We have linguistic anthropology. I am a horrible linguist. But we have good linguistic anthropologists. We have applied anthropologists who have studied far more extensively than I do. And then we have cultural anthropologists. So when people ask you, what are you taking? I'm doing a class in cultural anthropology. I'll tell you right now, what is that? That's going to be their next question. What is that? It's a study of human behaviors around the globe. All right? So that's kind of where we're at. Now, let me give you an overview of where this class is going to take us. I've got my little chart here, my little pie chart. And you'll see that in the green, around the outside of the pie chart, is the label Worldview. Now, that's going to be the first topic we look into. We're going to look at Worldview, and I put it on the outside there because Worldview is kind of the thing that holds everything else together. Worldview, as we'll discover in the next lecture, will be how we understand the world and our place in it. And it will establish patterns of behavior that will then be lived out in each one of the slices of the pie in there. For instance, we'll look at production systems, how some people are farmers, other people are hunters and gatherers, other people are foragers, or they will graze their crops as migratory herders. We'll look at various ways of producing food. We'll look at economic systems, how wealth gets distributed throughout the culture. We'll look at kinship systems over there. Oh, it's on that side. It's on that side here. Okay, kinship systems. We'll be looking at how various cultures structure the families. We'll look at political systems, how they choose their leaders. We'll look at social systems, how people are categorized as effective members of the society. We'll look at marriage systems. Marriages are very fragile relationships in every culture. Trying to get men and women to live together and stay together is a problem every culture has to face. We'll look at the various rules and regulations that people have experimented with to try to hold marriages together. We'll look at religious systems. Now, on the outside of the circle, I've written a number of little words. For instance, up there under economic systems, it says redistribution, reciprocity, market. Under kinship systems, it says Sudanese, Eskimo, Hawaiian. Well, these are all the subcategories that we'll be studying under these various categories. So there's your whole semester outline for you. This is what we're going to be looking at. Now, if you get done with this class and you decide, you know what, I really like this kind of stuff, well, then we have intensive classes on every one of these parts of the pie. We have classes on economic anthropology. Kevin Piddle does a class on magic, witchcraft, and sorcery that looks at the various religious systems. Dr. Sue Russell has a class on family systems and social systems. Every one of these can be studied in greater depth to make you a specialist on it, if life takes you there. All right, well, we're going to start right now with the whole question of what in the world is worldview, all right? Because that's our first topic. That's the first band that holds it all together. Now, your textbook does not address the question of worldview. So, that is, it's not in chapter 1. It's not in chapter 2. It's not even in chapter 16. So, all of this stuff comes from the lectures alone. All right, That part that's up there in yellow, that's a definition of worldview. Worldview consists of the underlying assumptions of a group of people about the nature of the world in which we live. It includes such basic concepts as the nature of time, the nature of space, an understanding of who you are, of cause and effect, and of order in nature or in creation. Now, these are going to be the 5 universal elements of worldview. Now, worldview is much more extensive than that. I'm reading another dissertation right now on Indonesian worldview, and we've discovered some major themes in an Indonesian worldview that are much more specific, that are important. So we're exploring those, and the student is trying to identify what those are. But let's talk about self-understanding. All right? Who are you? What rights do you have? In an American culture, due to an American worldview, you are given unprecedented human rights, individual rights, rights to make your own decisions, your own choices. Most of you have the right to choose your own future spouse. Now, I remember I went off to Bible school and I met this beautiful young lady who also happened to be from California. I thought, I'm going to get to know her. I won't go into my weird courtship because I was a weird guy. I mean, I was. Talk about the quintessential nerd. That's me. Anyway, it took a couple of years, but she finally decided that would be all right to date me, and so I took her on our first date. And of course, now we're at Woody Bible Institute, and there are certain things you can't do there. You can't smoke, you can't chew, you can't drink, and you can't go with girls that do. You know what I mean? So there were only a few things that we could do. So I took her bowling. She'd never been bowling in her life. And she was not a happy camper, because, when you go bowling, what do you have to do? You have to pick up that heavy ball, you have to get it down there, and you have to knock over some pins. And all the while you're doing that, you're doing it in a bent over position with a certain part of your anatomy facing the man that you're trying to impress. It was not a good choice. But in any case, we had our first date, and somehow or other we managed to survive. And next thing you know, we're beginning to get a little bit more serious. And on the way back to California, we have to go right through her hometown. So she says, why don't you come meet my parents? So I went to meet her parents. Hi, this is Doug, my friend from college. I couldn't call him Mom and Dad, because that was a bit premature. I'm me. After I left, it was very obvious Mom and Dad didn't like Mr. Doug. Not even a little bit. I'm extrovertish, bombastic, obnoxious, and I've got this really horrible laugh. I laugh with enthusiasm. And her mother actually said, do you really enjoy that ostentatious laugh? And look at his teeth. Crooked? I mean, that boy needs a good orthodontist. I never heard of an orthodontist. From the age of 16 on, I was on my own. My parents never put another dime into my education or my health care. I had to take care of all those on my own. They were not real happy, and when we decided we were getting married, we called Mom and Dad. Hey, guess what? We're going to get married in 2 weeks. We had a family crisis on our hands. They did not want their daughter marrying me. But in American culture, you can do that, can't you? I don't recommend it, but you come home right now, we want to talk some sense into you. She looked at me and said, I'm your prince in shining armor, I'll stand between you and them. I called up and said, hey, Mom, Dad, we're getting married. The date is September 9th, and you are invited to the wedding. You can come or stay home. I don't care. I told you I was a troublemaker. And they didn't like me. Now, they've since gotten over that. Well, they better, because they're both in heaven now. But I was not their first catch. Now, that's entirely different than one of our graduate students whose parents were missionaries in India. And he grew up in India. And one day his dad was at a pastor's conference with an Indian pastor, and they were getting ready for the conference agenda. And the missionary man said, oh, I wish I could find a good daughter for my son. And the Indian pastor said, oh, I wish I could find a good son or husband for my daughter. And all of a sudden they looked at each other and said, why not? So they went home after the conference, and the missionary dad went to his son and said, son, how about if I picked your wife out for it? Would you like a nice Indian wife? And he said, oh yeah, that'd be fine, Dad. Because arranged marriages are kind of the thing in India. And the Indian dad, he went home and told his daughter, I found a good husband for you. She said, oh, I'm so excited. Who is it? And the father said, a white guy. And she burst into tears and ran into her room. I don't want to marry a smelly white man. I want to marry a nice Indian man. You'll marry who I choose. And so she caved in. She did not have the right to oppose her parents. It's an arranged marriage. So they got married. And a few months ago, he graduated from our program here with his MA, and his wife was there with 3 delightful daughters. And I'm sitting at the banquet table, and she's telling me this story about how she didn't want to marry him. And I said, do you still feel like you made a bad mistake? She said, oh, no. The best thing, I'm very happy now. My father knew what was right for me. Fathers know best. Are you willing to trust your parents to make your choice for a spouse? No. That's not an American value or worldview system. That's what worldview does for you. Worldview determines who you are and how you are going to relate to all of life's challenges. It is the manner in which you will relate to space and time. And we'll be talking about a few of these things as we go on. So, this lecture on worldview is going to try to address each one of those 5 points, all right? So, when it comes to concepts of self, worldview is going to try to answer this question: who am I? The next question it's going to ask is, who are you? Then it's going to try to answer the question, what is everything else? And then, how do I relate to each other? Now, every little baby that's born has to figure out who it is and who is everybody else. That little baby lying there in its crib, it's just beginning to get its vision. Everything is kind of blurry, but it will quickly find out that when mother comes and speaks in her motherly voice, and when she picks the baby up and holds that baby close to her and nourishes it, feeds it, that baby immediately begins to identify mother as a caregiver, as somebody that can be trusted, as somebody who is not themselves but is different. After a while, they're going to begin to see things in front of their heads or in front of their eyes. They don't know that this is not them, but they soon discover that they have control over their hands. This is me. Now, the little thing that's going around up there may be something hanging over my crib. That's not me. I don't have control over that. But this is me. I can control this. It discovers who it is, what its appendages are. And it can begin to tell whether a big slobbery kiss from dad is different than a big slobbery kiss from your family's Cocker Spaniel. So they begin to sort out who they are, who you are, what everything else is. This is the formation of a worldview perspective. And they will quickly learn how to relate to each other. Now, little babies will be friendly toward anybody, strangers, anybody. And when we were going into the villages, we would walk in, there'd be women in there with their young babies, and we want to inoculate their young babies against infectious diseases. And we would take those little babies into our, and they'd be so happy, until we stuck them with the needle. But they would go to us willingly. You can actually pattern and predict how old they were within a few days by whether they had a fear of strangers or not. Because as they got a little bit older, we'd say, "Oh, come on, see me." And the kids even start crying. I haven't even touched the kid. He doesn't remember I'm the one that gave him the shot, last year. But the kid doesn't like me already because he's beginning to distinguish between caregivers, non-caregivers. As that child grows up, they will sort out between fellow villagers, hostile villagers. This is all part of worldview formation. Worldview will become the foundation for how they know things, for all of their knowledge systems, for how they discover the nature of the world in which we live. It will become the basis for their system of values. What they determine is so important that they are willing to sacrifice for it. I was watching, we get paid TV at our place, and I was watching the Military Channel the other day. And I was watching a program on World War II. And they were talking about the bombing of Germany. And it was an atrocious time. But the British and the Americans were pretty upset with Hitler anyway for bombing London. And so they went over there and kind of just bombed the living daylights out of Dresden and several other cities. And it's not something we should be proud of. And ultimately, we shocked even ourselves when we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki and created one of the greatest travesties on civilian populations that's ever been perpetrated on people. But one of the interesting things, they were interviewing some Germans and they said, we could not figure out why the British and the Americans were so angry with us. All we wanted to do was create a better world for everyone. And that's how they saw World War II. They did not see themselves as aggressors. They saw themselves as introducing a better world for everybody. And in order to have a better world for everybody, Hitler needed to be in charge. He had to get rid of the things that were bad, namely economic imbalance and the injustices perpetrated by what he believed to be inferior races, namely gypsies, Jews, and homosexuals. And they were all sent to the gas chambers. Well, here's a value system. They did not see that they were doing wrong, but we did. Why? Because we believed in freedom of us to make our own decisions, not have it dictated to us by Hitler and his Gestapo. Now, Your worldview is going to establish your value systems. It's going to establish patterns of behavior. Right now, you are sitting in a classroom listening to me drone on and on and on, when I know you'd rather be in the caf having your dinner or doing something fun. Why are you doing it? Because I'm going to fail you if you don't stay here. And you are willing to subject yourself to my rules, my regulations, my requirements, and those of the university in order to get something that's of value to you, namely a college education, and then a better job, et cetera, et cetera. It will also be the foundations for what you think is beautiful, for what you think is worth investing in. So your art, your sense of designer clothes. The devil wears Prada, but you will be determining whether you agree with the fashion designers or whether you want something independent. Worldview will also help you, guide you, be instrumental in your establishing meaning and purpose in life. Now, I told you last time about my encounter with Jesus Christ on the Hermosa Beach Road, not the road to Emmaus, but on that road, I discovered I had to share my joy with the world. That became the driving focus that brought meaning and purpose to my life. Your worldview will determine what you want to invest in for the rest of your lives.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.